June the 28th, 1914, Sarajevo. The city has been awake since dawn. Crowds pack the Apel Quay along the river. Shopkeepers, school children, officials in their Sunday clothes. Flags hang from the windows of the Austro-Hungarian administration buildings. It is a state visit. It is supposed to be a celebration. The date is Vidovdan, June the 28th. In the Serbian calendar, this is the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo, 1389, the day the medieval Serbian kingdom fell to the Ottomans. Every Serbian child knows this date. Every Serbian nationalist treats it as sacred ground. And today, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire has chosen it to parade through a city that does not consider itself Austrian. In the crowd, 6 young men are waiting. They have guns, they have grenades, they have cyanide pills in case it goes wrong. It is about to go wrong in ways none of them anticipated. You've probably heard the story. Gavrilo Princip, the man who fired the shots that started the First World War, had given up. The assassination attempt had failed. He wandered away from the chaos and stopped at a delicatessen for a sandwich. And while he was eating, fate brought the Archduke's car directly to his door. 1 bite of lunch, and 20 million people died. It is a perfect story. It has everything: irony, accident, the absurdity of history hinging on a meal. Historians have found no any of it is true. There was no sandwich, there was no deli visit. What actually happened that morning was messier, more chaotic, and in some ways far more disturbing, because it doesn't require fate, it doesn't require destiny. It just requires a driver who turned down the wrong street. His name was Gavrilo Princip. He was 19 years old. He was born in 1894 in a small village in western Bosnia, the 6th child of a postal worker who farmed a rented plot of land and paid 1/3 of everything he grew to a landlord he'd never chosen. The family was poor in the way that leaves a mark on the body. As a child, Gavrilo contracted tuberculosis. He would carry it the rest of his life. At 13, he was sent to Sarajevo to study. He was a good student. He was also furious at Austria, at occupation, at what Bosnia had become under Habsburg rule. He joined anti-Austrian demonstrations. He was expelled from school. He walked to Belgrade in Serbia to continue his education. He walked because he couldn't afford the fare. In Belgrade, he found men who shared his politics and who would supply him with something more useful than books: a Browning pistol, a hand grenade, and a cyanide capsule. The capsule, he would discover, was expired. He was 27 days short of his 20th birthday on the morning of June 28th. The Black Hand. Formally, unification or death. A secret paramilitary society founded in Belgrade in 1911 by officers in the Serbian army. Its stated goal: to unite all South Slavic peoples under Serbian rule by any means necessary. Its leader, Colonel Dragutin Dmitrievich, known by his codename Apis. He was the head of Serbian military intelligence. He had already organized one royal assassination, the killing of the Serbian king and queen in 1903. He was not a man who hesitated. Apis had a specific reason to want Franz Ferdinand dead. The Archduke was considered a moderate, someone who might actually improve conditions in Bosnia, reduce resentment, and stabilize Austro-Hungarian rule. A pacified Bosnia meant no revolution. No revolution meant no unified South Slav state. So the man most likely to bring peace to the region had to die, precisely because of it. 4 pistols, 6 grenades, cyanide capsules for each conspirator. 6 young men smuggled back across the border into Bosnia. The plan was simple. The execution would not be. The motorcade's route through Sarajevo had been published in the city's newspapers. This was standard procedure for a state visit. Crowds needed to gather, officials needed to be in position. Security, such as it was, needed to be arranged. The Archduke and his wife Sophie would travel in an open-top car along the Appel Quay, the wide boulevard running alongside the Miljatska River, then turn through the city toward the town hall for a formal reception. 6 assassins were positioned along this route. They had been placed by Danilo Ilic, the coordinator on the ground, a man who would later be executed for his role. Each was armed, each had a cyanide capsule. Each had been told, "One of you only needs to succeed." The morning of June the 28th was warm and cloudless. Franz Ferdinand rode in the lead car in full military dress. Sophie sat beside him in white. They were waving to the crowds. Somewhere ahead of them, 6 young men were watching the car approach. Nedeljko Kabrinović stepped forward from the crowd. He was one of the 6. His position was near the beginning of the route. As the Archduke's car passed, he pulled the pin from his grenade, struck the detonator cap against a lamppost to arm it, and threw. He aimed for the open car. The grenade hit the folded-back canvas roof and bounced. It fell onto the road and detonated beneath the 4th car in the motorcade, the one carrying aides and officers. Several people were wounded. The Archduke was untouched. Kabrinović swallowed his cyanide capsule. He jumped over the embankment into the Miljatska River. The cyanide did nothing. It was old, degraded, barely functional. The river was 4 inches deep. He was dragged out of the water by the crowd and beaten until police arrived to take him. The motorcade accelerated. It was over. The Archduke was alive. The plot had failed. 5 assassins stood along the route and watched the cars disappear. The other 5 did nothing. One by one, as the motorcade accelerated past their positions, the remaining assassins failed to act. Some froze. Some were blocked by the crowd. One later claimed he didn't fire because there were too many bystanders nearby. Whatever the reason, the cars swept through and were gone. The plan was over. Princip moved away from the Appel Quay. He had been positioned further along the route, close to the Latin Bridge near the intersection with Franz Josef Street. When the cars accelerated past without stopping, he had no shot. He drifted away from the quay into the side streets of central Sarajevo. Not to a deli, not to lunch, just away, into the city with a pistol in his coat and nowhere to be. He was 19. He had just failed at the only thing he had crossed a border for. Inside Sarajevo's town hall, the Archduke was furious. The mayor began his prepared welcome address, cheerful, formal, entirely inappropriate for what had just happened. Franz Ferdinand interrupted him. "I come here on a visit," he said, "and am greeted with bombs." He let the mayor finish. He was a Habsburg. Dignity was non-negotiable. But he did not leave. He had officers wounded in the grenade attack lying in the military hospital across the city. He intended to visit them, both to demonstrate courage and to fulfill his obligations as a Habsburg heir. His aides argued. His security advisors argued. He insisted. A new route was decided. Instead of continuing through the old bazaar district as originally planned, the motorcade would turn back along the Appel Quay, the safer, wider road, and proceed directly to the hospital. The decision was made quickly, in a room full of people speaking German. The drivers were Czech. The new route was simple. Stay on the Appel Quay. Do not turn off onto Franz Josef Street. Proceed directly to the hospital. Someone communicated this to the motorcade. Exactly who, exactly how, and to whom. This is where the historical record becomes unclear. Some accounts point to a language barrier between German-speaking officers and Czech-speaking drivers. Others describe simple confusion in the shock of the moment. What is certain is this: the instruction did not reach the men at the wheel. Whether they misunderstood, whether they weren't told at all, whether they simply forgot in the noise and shock of the morning, no one has ever established with certainty. What they did was follow the original route. Out of habit, or incomplete orders, or both, the lead car turned right at the corner of Franz Josef Street. exactly where the motorcade was no longer supposed to go. The wrong road, the wrong turn. General Oskar Potorik was riding in the second car when he realized what was happening. The lead car had turned onto Franz Josef Street, the wrong street, the one the motorcade had been told to avoid. Potorik shouted at the driver. He was going the wrong way. The driver did what drivers do when someone shouts that they've made a wrong turn. He stopped the car. He began to reverse. The motorcade, a line of heavy, open-top automobiles on a narrow cobblestone street, ground to a halt. The engine stuttered, the gearbox ground, the car rolled slowly backward. It was a moment lasting perhaps 20 seconds, an awkward, unglamorous pause in the middle of a state visit, a bureaucratic error being corrected. 20 seconds, 4 inches of river, a cyanide capsule that didn't work. Everything that happened next required all three. Gavrilo Princip was standing at the corner of Franz Josef Street. He had no plan. The morning had already failed. He was 19 years old, with an expired cyanide capsule and a pistol he hadn't fired, standing on a side street in a city where he had once gone to school, waiting for nothing in particular. The car reversed toward him. He would later say that he didn't think, that there was no decision, only the car stopping, and the man he recognized in the back seat. 5 feet away, less. The most powerful car in the motorcade, carrying the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, had just reversed to a complete stop directly in front of him, because a driver had taken a wrong turn. He drew the Browning. He fired twice. In that moment, 20 seconds of a reversing car, a wrong turn, a miscommunicated order, and a cyanide capsule made perhaps a decade too early, the 20th century became what it was. 2 shots. The first struck Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, in the abdomen. She slumped sideways in her seat. The second struck Franz Ferdinand in the jugular vein. Count Franz von Herrick, riding on the running board of the car as a bodyguard, later described what he saw. A thin stream of blood arcing from the Archduke's mouth onto his right cheek. Franz Ferdinand reached toward his wife. He said in German, Sophie dear, don't die. Stay alive for our children." She was already dying. He lost consciousness within minutes. Both were dead before they reached medical care. The driver accelerated. The car carrying the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire and his wife moved through the streets of Sarajevo. Too fast now. Too late. Toward a governor's residence where there were no doctors and where the century changed in a back room while people ran for help that never came in time. Princip was seized within seconds. He did not resist. He swallowed his cyanide capsule, the same expired batch the others had been given. It did nothing. He was pulled to the ground, beaten by the crowd, and taken by the police. He was 19 years old. He weighed less than 50 kilograms. He had tuberculosis. He had just fired 2 shots that would kill 20 million people, and he had no real understanding yet of what he had set in motion. At his trial, 4 months later, he would say, "I am not a criminal because I destroyed that which was evil." He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, the maximum penalty for a person who committed murder before the age of 20. He had been 27 days short of his birthday. The law could not hang him. He would live 4 more years, long enough to hear about the war, long enough to know. The war did not begin that afternoon. It took 5 weeks. Austria-Hungary drafted an ultimatum to Serbia, deliberately designed to be rejected. Serbia accepted nearly every term, but not all of them. On July the 28th, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war. Russia, bound by treaty and Slavic solidarity, began to mobilize. Germany declared war on Russia. France was drawn in by its alliance with Russia. When Germany invaded Belgium to outflank France, Britain entered the war. Within 6 weeks of 2 shots on a Sarajevo side street, most of Europe was burning. The mechanism was not inevitable. Historians have argued for a century about which choices could have broken the chain. What is clear is that the chain existed, a web of alliances and obligations and nationalist pressures that had been building since the 1870s, and that what it needed was a trigger. 2 shots, 5 weeks, 20 million dead. Gavrilo Princip arrived at Terezin Fortress in Bohemia in December 1914. It was a military prison built to be harsh. He was placed in solitary confinement and shackled with chains that weighed 20 pounds. The tuberculosis he had carried since childhood spread through his body unchecked. His right arm was amputated in 1917 when the bone disease could no longer be contained. He died on April the 28th, 1918. He was 23 years old. He weighed 40 kilograms, 88 pounds. The war he had started had 1 more year to run. He never saw a trench. He never fired another shot. He spent 4 years in a stone cell while the world he had unmade killed itself. Historians later searched the Terezin records for evidence of how he spent those years. They found one detail that has stayed with people. He had spent his time in the cell reading books, as many as the guards would bring him. No sandwich, no destiny, no hand of fate reaching down to place a 19-year-old student at the right corner at the right moment. Just a driver who wasn't told about the route change, or who was told in a language he didn't fully understand, or who, in the chaos of a grenade attack, simply forgot. The historical record is not certain which. It was probably some combination of all 3. A car, a corner, 20 seconds of reversing. That is what the 20th century was built on. 20 million dead in the First World War. The collapse of 4 empires, Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, German, Russian. The rise of the conditions that produced the Second World War. 50 million more. The Cold War. The shape of every border in Europe redrawn by what happened on a Sarajevo street corner on the morning of June the 28th, 1914. Not fate, not a sandwich, a wrong turn. History is full of wrong turns. Most of them nobody remembers. A few of them remake the world. If you want to keep finding the ones that got missed, subscribe to Empire of Time, where we explore stories like this every week. And if this one stayed with you, leave a comment. Tell us which moment changed everything for you. We'll see you next time.